I'm introducing our last but certainly not least wonderful, wonderful yoga therapist speaker, Therese Lew. Teresa G. Therese is a person who I've known for a long time now, and she maintains extraordinary optimism when life throws out to her some of the most difficult circumstances. And I threw her a difficult circumstance a few days ago, and that was to come and rescue this topic, because sadly the speaker who was originally going to do this topic was a little bit overwhelmed by the flood conditions that had happened in the North Coast. And at very short notice, Therese agreed to do this. So we're incredibly grateful, but I'm thinking in retrospect, I couldn't think of anyone better to do it. The topic is knowing and winning over patterns of life. And could you all join me in welcoming Therese Lew? Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about knowing and understanding our patterns of life, or in other words, our habits. So that's what I'll be talking about. But first of all, I come from a background of osteopathy and naturopathy, and where I found, as Libby expressed as a physiotherapist, that it didn't have all the answers, and we knew that it's the whole person, not just the parts. So with that in my background, and then coming to yoga, I was fortunate to be on the path of the Krishnamacharya teaching through Yoga Therapy Australia, who brought out the wonderful teachers, Dr. Natisen Chandrasekaran and Saraswati Vasudevan. And then, of course, we terminated our study in India with an internship with those wonderful teachers. So I'm very grateful to have come to this path. And I've often said, if I said I owed my life to yoga, it wouldn't be an overstatement. It has been enormously helpful to me, and it was something I wanted to then to be able to use as an understanding and a framework for people to be able to be better, healthier, and yes, be more fulfilled. And in the end, that's where the happiness is, that I believe. Okay, so, and I'm also grateful to the Australasian Association of Yoga Therapy, otherwise known as AAYT, to be able to have been on the committee and to have been able to contribute today. So thank you. So knowing and winning over patterns of life. I had to think about this very, very quickly. And what I started to think about was that patterns in life can be both useful and helpful when we have a pattern and a habit that is fulfilling and fruitful. But some habits are not so fruitful. And at the end, I think if we could put them all in the same basket, all habits don't serve us, because when we have a habit, we're not there. The habit is taking over. And if we're not present to know and observe and realize, have that awareness of our action, what that action is leading us to, then we're in the humdrum of life. It may be suitable for some people, that's no problem. But if you want more, I guess, in the sense of well-being and your health, then yes, it's good to be watchful and mindful of your actions and your daily activities, which become your habits. Yeah. Okay, so patterns of life, because they become a repetitious action, they become so habitual and repetitive that then they take over, and then we basically, they leave an impression in the end. And yoga teaches us or talks to us about samskara. So the impressions of our actions or our repetitive actions are going to leave an impression, and they are known as samskara, as you know. And it's because we're doing the same thing again and again. So why is this a bad thing? It's because we're not aware. And when we're not aware, we don't have choice. It's a bit like our choice isn't there because now the habit has taken over. Okay. Now, coming from the health industry in the first instance, I'd like to think of it more as a repetitive strain injury. When you overuse your wrist or your hand, you end up with repetitive strain injury of the wrist, of the tendons, and you have overused that and you've worn that tendon out, that it then needs, it sort of calls for you to stop. So you then end up with a symptom of pain, and then I'll go through how we would approach that in yoga. So that repetitive strain injury is a bit like our lives as well. We can use that as a parallel to other things that we do in our life that could be harmful. And then we have to ask ourselves about the himsa, or one of the yamas is ahimsa, you know, so do no harm to yourself or others. And the yamas and the niyamas have been coming up in every talk so far, so we know what they are. They're the guidelines of our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to our environment. But we have to keep ourselves in the context of our environment, and that's where our behaviours are. That they come from our environment and they are in response to our environment. And most of the times we're reacting rather than responding because we get caught up. Okay. So a good way to see these patterns is, in the health context, is to see them in the light of chronic health conditions that arise for all of us. Over time, you know, you develop a chronic health condition. We all do, but things like chronic headaches, lower back pain or back pain, shoulder, repetitious work from shoulder work, and so on. So something's going to get worn out from repetitive use. So the chronic health conditions are a good way to look at what our samskaras can do, or our habits, what impression that they can leave on us. All right. And the reason that these, just one little thing here in the context of why this repetitious sort of patterning, or the reason is because when you're doing this repetitious humdrum, repetitious life, like you walk and you cup of coffee first thing, you go in a straight line, mindlessly go for that cup of coffee or whatever's going to give you that short-term fix. The problem with that is we become stagnant because we're only on this little bit of the path, and there's so much more. So when you constantly repeat, you start to become stagnant. When you're stagnant and the world around you is governed by Prakriti, the ever-changing, everything we live in is changing. We see that through the seasons, we see that through ourselves as we're aging, everything is changing. But if we stay in humdrum, we are no longer adaptable. We don't adapt to the other changes that might call upon us. So that is the problem with habitual or the himsa that can happen from our patterns in life or our habits. Okay, so if patterns in life can show up on a physical level, so I'll use the example of chronic back pain. So someone that comes or comes to see, I attract a lot of back pain. And then you have to look at that person in their context, in their environment. So a good example of that is going to be an expression of samskara in their physical body, but it doesn't just stay in the physical body, because when you have chronic pain, it permeates through your whole being, through the whole Panchamaya model, okay? Through, it affects you physically, and it stops you from perhaps doing the things you want to do in your life. It can take you off your course somewhere. It affects you emotionally, mentally, your ability to relate to others. We know that. So what does a person do? If I just look at pain for one little moment, the first thing we do for pain is we want relief. And what the relief will give us, it'll take us away from that distraction that the pain has been causing us. But if we listen to the pain, well, we go for relief, we'll go for the fast fix, the medication, what's available. But what we end up doing is we keep on doing the things that we did in our daily habits that may have caused or contributed to that problem greatly. And so we haven't changed anything. So that pain was really a signal for change, a signal to say stop, listen, look. But what do? We soldier on, and we have this attitude in the Western world that you just soldier on. And there are the pressures of life and our commitments to our families and so on, that we can't stop long enough to pick ourselves up again in that recovery stage that we just mentioned. I think Rob mentioned about recovery. That's very important. Okay, so what are some of the ways that these chronic health conditions can affect us? Well, the first thing is pain. And as a yoga therapist, when someone comes to see me, for instance, they're in pain, they're in discomfort, they are wanting something. So the first thing when they come, they present, you step back a little bit and look at what you can see in them. And the first part is the form that they have, their body. So you notice posture, and you start to put a little bit of understanding, which you can feed back to them about what is going on for them physically. And then you notice their breathing, a pattern in their breath that might be up here. But what we're looking for, I think Libby might have mentioned prana. So you can see in their demeanor, in their posture, where the prana is not moving freely. And we know that that's going to be where the source of the problem might be for them on the physical level. Okay. I might be jumping around, I'm so sorry, but okay, so what I found to be true, though, in most of these conditions like chronic lower back pain is it comes down to lifestyle, what they've been doing over a period of time. And we have to consider, as yoga therapists, we like the lower back pain, right? So if you take that, for example, I know my teachers have things like, you know, you really ask the question, whose lower back pain or whose asthma is it? You know, it's the person. So you have to regard the person and look at them in their context, as I said. All right. So how would we approach this in the yoga sense? You know, someone with lower back pain, you would, first of all, look at the symptoms. So the symptoms are signals. It's just waking up the body to pay attention, for that person to pay attention. Okay, so the symptoms are what the person's experiencing. Okay, so you would go through that, and the symptoms really are the call for change, and that's why they've come to you. They've stopped that and they've said, I'm going to go and try yoga. I heard that yoga is good. Yoga can help me relax. Yoga can make me more flexible. They want those sorts of things that they think might be useful. So then in the yoga therapy approach, you would look at, okay, so what are the symptoms? Okay, then what's the problem? Okay, so then go to the area of the problem. And most oftentimes the problem really isn't what's presenting, it's coming from another related part of their, so if they're lower back, it could be coming from, you know, their posture, like we have, well, that would take us to what we call precipitating factors. So the genetics, you know, that perhaps there was a tendency in their genetic, which is we all come in with our genetic pattern into this world. We come with our vasanas, and we are, and that's what we have to work with. And once we're here, we are adapting to that. So you look at the precipitating factors, the tendency of that person. They might have developed a scoliosis, which might be a genetic, or they have that instability of their, like a spondylolisthesis, where there's instability in the L4-5. And so what happens there is that tendency. So we know that that tendency is there, and then how do we work with that? So then you look at what's the aggravating factors. What are the factors in the lifestyle that are worsening this problem that they might have had the tendency to? So it's never really that simple. And then, so you have to take all these factors into account. And then how do you approach it? The first thing you do with a chronic health problem or an acute problem is make the person comfortable, because when they're dealing with pain, that the pain is going to be the distraction for everything that they do. They'll be so busy trying to manage the pain. So make them comfortable, go into the breath. So first of all, lying postures, settle the breath. The beautiful relaxations that we did with Sandra, beautiful practice that we did with Patricia. So when the person is comfortable, then you can go to the next level of movement and then strengthening them, so that then you're on the prevention sort of level again, so it doesn't happen again and again and again. And those times they will always have to make lifestyle changes, and they know that, because they know what makes it worse and what makes it better. So they know, and then they develop this self-awareness. And of course, they have to change the patterns. And that's what we're talking about, the habits in their life that have taken over. I hope that's making sense. And, oh, I just have a little sanity about patterns and habits. A definition of insanity that I've heard many times, and I think I'll adopt it. Insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. I find that very humorous. We've all done it though. Okay. Okay, and then about himself. Okay, so what do we have to do in yoga? What we're really doing is we're pacifying. So you would do a real nice Langana practice where you're on the floor. You would do a lot of being still, finding the most comfortable position. Start with very small movements, follow the breath, and meditation. A meditation practice to relax the body. So you can still use the body as the instrument, again, to find your way to relaxation. So a Langana practice, and from that you can develop self-awareness. So you start to know your body better, you start to have a deeper understanding, and the breath is the key. And then you have to relearn. It's a relearning process. So when we've broken a habit that's got us to a certain place, we undergo a relearning of another way, which opens up the world. When we've been on the humdrum, the world has closed on us. We've only seen that much. When you make a change and you see and you stop and you listen, all the options become apparent to you. And then the changes can be made for the better. So that's where the choice is, and that's where I think happiness is in choice, in knowing what to do, being guided with a good teacher of yoga and a therapist. So stop, listen, learn. And we also go through an unlearning, because those habits of life got us to a certain point, okay? Unlearning them means letting them go. So we have to then undergo letting go. We are not those things that we were doing, so we can let them go. And then I could give examples there, but I think you know what I mean, like the daily habits that we do. Think, stop, listen, pause, count to 3 or count to 10. But unlearning is really difficult, because it is the letting go, and we can learn to let go just by stopping and slowing and realizing that we don't need all those things that we do and that we hold on to. And then when you're relearning, that's where the yoga comes in. So you can do a practice of moving your body a certain way and knowing that you can turn and that the body can have more freedom when you're relearning, and that will take you to other levels of relearning. Okay, so in the relearning, I mean, science today is talking about neuroplasticity of the brain. If we stay on the humdrum, the brain dies, it switches off, and it only knows that much. When you start to relearn and open your mind to new learning, you make discoveries, and freedom starts to be more an option, free from pain, free from emotional distress, and all the things that come with humdrum. I'll call it humdrum. So relearning neuroplasticity. Yep. So the neuroplasticity is about the opening up new pathways of the nervous system through the brain. And for me, yoga was all about the nervous system. It wasn't about anything else, because that's what wires us all up. The mind, the thinking, the muscles, the relaxation is all woven in and wired up through our nervous system. And I find that fascinating. So to access the neuroplasticity of the brain with a yoga practice is so empowering. And when we do that, we can change the course of the direction that our daily habit this way might have been taking us down a certain path. Now we can change the course, or we can open it up, and we can participate in our lives a lot more in the direction that we want for ourselves. And that's what I often ask people, what is it that you want? You know, why have you come to yoga?
Therese Lew, I'm afraid that we are running short of time. So sorry, if I may request you.
One last thing, thank you, I didn't mean to go that far. One little thing, for neuroplasticity, I'd just like to do a very quick exercise. I just ask you now just to look at your hands and just interlace your fingers. Can you just interlace your fingers like this? Now look down at your hand and notice which index finger is on the top. Okay? Take note. Now separate your hands. Now I want you to interlace your fingers with the other index finger on the top. And I want you just to stay with that and notice how, when it's unfamiliar, it wakes up another part of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Therese. That was, you bring so much knowledge into your observations. A lot of your clinical knowledge, I know, has come into observing. And I think you know, there's a lot to take away from that. The stop, listen, look, press the pause button, watching where the prana is. Thank you so much for your wonderful presence, particularly at such a late point in time that you were asked to participate, and you brought the wealth of knowledge that you have into your insight. So thank you once again.